the welcoming of our special invitees for the inauguration ceremony of the Annual Scientific Congress 2020 of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The arrival of the ceremonial procession for the inauguration of the Annual Scientific Congress 2020 of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka. And we are ready to light this very special oil lamp in keeping the traditions of Sri Lanka. So it gives me great pleasure to call upon the following special invitees and dignitaries to join with us to do the honors. Can we have with us Dr. Asala Gunawardana, Director General of Health Services of the Ministry of Health, Dr. Kaushalya Kasturi Arachi, President of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, Dr. Suranta Pereira, immediate past President and the Congress Chair 2020 of the Annual Scientific Congress of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, Dr. Asri Hevamalage, Secretary of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, past President Dr. Indraji Vikramasekara, Treasurer Dr. Ruan Silva, Director Family Health Bureau Dr. Chitramali De Silva, and representing all the other colleges being present here, would like to call upon representing the College of Obstetricians, Dr. Pradeep De Silva, representing Community Physicians, Dr. Nihal Abe Singha, and representing the Ministry of Health, would like to call upon Director International Health of the Ministry of Health, Dr. Alan Ludwig, past President, in fact, the President-elect of the College of Pediatricians, Professor Shaman Rajit, and the President-elect of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, Dr. Sanath Lanaral, joining with us to do the honors in lighting this very special lamp, marking the inauguration of the Annual Scientific Congress 2020 of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And now would like to call upon the members of the head table to come near your respective seating areas. Can we have the Director General of Health Services of the Ministry of Health, Dr. Asela Gunawardana, being accompanied by Dr. Kaushalya Kasturiarachi, President of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, immediate past President and the Congress Chair 2020, Dr. Suranta Pereira, and the Secretary to the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, Dr. Asiri Heva Malage. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain upstanding for the national anthem of Sri Lanka. Thank you very much, everyone. Please be seated. The Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, a non-profit organization, multidisciplinary one, established as the apex body here in Sri Lanka, striving to provide and promote the continuing improvement in the quality of healthcare from the preconception through birth of the baby and into infancy. The Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka advocates the ideal and ethical care through education and research, influence national policies, and encourage strategic collaboration among healthcare providers and stakeholders in order to ensure the optimal pregnancy outcomes for mothers and babies. And today, we mark the 20th anniversary in delivering the services to the entire nation. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the annual Scientific Congress 2020 of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka. To make the opening remarks and to give you all an outline of what in store for you all during this edition of the annual Scientific Congress, it gives me great pleasure to call upon. Please welcome Dr. Suranta Pereira, the immediate past President and the Congress Chair of 2020.
Our Chief Guest, Director General of Health Services, Dr. Asela Gunawardana, President of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, Dr. Kaushalya Kasturiarachi, The Secretary of Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, Dr. Asiri Heva Malage, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I warmly welcome all of you to the inauguration ceremony of the 19th Annual Scientific Congress of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka. The Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka has had a productive year in 2020 in midst of a COVID-19 pandemic which threatened the lives of the people and their economy. We did not give up our quench for the new knowledge. We continued to organize academic activities in hybrid format while following all the stipulated guidelines by the health authorities. Our society clearly demonstrated the concept of living with COVID-19 with new challenges and uplifting the standards of perinatal care in our country. This year's annual scientific congress is being held at Water's Edge, Battaramulla, and pre-congress for nurses and midwives were concluded yesterday. It was successfully held with limited number of nurses participating in person and a large number of midwives joining virtually, a number exceeding 2,000. We are fortunate to have eminent speakers from locally and internationally for this year's Congress who will enlighten the participants with new knowledge. All the foreign speakers will join virtually and almost all local speakers will attend in person. We encourage physical participation for a predetermined number, and high-end IT team will augment the proceedings with online streaming, video conferencing, and 3D virtual reality. There are 2 orations, 2 keynote speeches, 6 symposiums, 6 plenaries, 2 panel discussions, and 2 workshops during the 2 days of annual scientific sessions. The oration of Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka will be delivered by Professor Stephen Kennedy, Professor of Reproductive Medicine, Co-Director at Oxford Maternal and Perinatal Health Institute at United Kingdom, on postnatal growth of preterm. Professor Indraji Amarsing's oration will be delivered by Professor João Paulo Sousa, who is an obstetrician and a professor of public health, University of Sao Paulo, Brazil, on obstetric transition, the pathway towards ending preventable maternal deaths. The 2 workshops on public-private partnership were on public-private partnership in healthcare, followed by gender implications on perinatal care. These were successfully held today. In addition, pre-congress for nurses and midwives consisted of 3 plenaries, 3 symposiums, and 1 panel discussion. This helps to address a wide array of topics and strike the finer balance between the art of practice and knowledge in science among healthcare workers involved in perinatal care. We hope for a successful annual congress this year, which meets the demands of the modern world with greater leaps in the scientific advances. I sincerely wish this new knowledge will help us to reorient our approach to perinatal care in our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suranta Pereira, the immediate past president and the Congress Chair 2020 of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, making the opening remarks. To welcome all of you for the annual Scientific Congress of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka 2020 and to make the presidential address, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, Dr. Kaushalya Kasturiarachi.
Good evening. Our chief guest tonight, Dr. Asela Gunawardena, Director General of Health Services, Congress Chair Dr. Suranta Pereira, Secretary Dr. Asiri Heva Malage, past presidents, members of the Council, distinguished guests from the Ministry of Health and the Family Health Bureau, presidents and secretaries of the other colleges and associations, representatives from the UN and other organizations, ladies and gentlemen. It is with pleasure that I welcome you all to the inaugural ceremony of the annual Scientific Congress of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka. We are greatly honored and privileged by the presence of Dr. Asela Gunawardena, the Director General of Health Services, Ministry of Health. And thank you very much, sir, for being with us despite your busy schedule. We are really thankful to all the other distinguished invitees who readily accepted our invitation and for being here this evening amidst this COVID-19 pandemic situation. Sorry. We began the year 2020 under the theme, Reach and Count Every Pregnant Mother and Newborn. It was quite an ambitious start and were cruising smoothly until the COVID-19 hit us hard and unexpectedly. However, we took up the challenge, worked hard, and achieved quite a number of results, of course, with the assistance of many of our collaborators, both international and national. Let me now briefly touch upon the key demonstrable activities that we were able to undertake during my tenure as the President. As you all aware, the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka has grown over the years under eminent leaderships of many presidents from year 2001. I am glad to share with you that our organization will soon become a legal entity, and the Perinatal Society will be registered under the Company Act. We are in the line of formalizing the arrangements by revision of the existing constitution in terms of achieving our professional goals. Following the same lines with regards to reorganizing our society, we have now registered our logo, which will ensure our unique identity. With the unexpected global pandemic hitting us, the country was on a total lockdown for nearly 3 months. COVID and the lockdown gave us the impetus to carry on doing useful work. We understood that the general public, especially the pregnant mothers and families with newborns, were facing many obstacles and uncertainties during this period. In response, the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka quickly prepared an information booklet for pregnant women in all 3 languages. This booklet dealt with practical steps to be adhered by the pregnant mothers and mothers with newborns during the lockdown. To supplement, several TV programs and radio programs were conducted by our council members. We launched a social media campaign to educate pregnant mothers and mothers with newborns on possible concerns of pregnant mothers and newborns facing the COVID threat. During this period, the entire health structure was forced to respond to COVID, and most of their routine work became secondary. There were many uncertainties among the grassroots level healthcare workers on what precaution they should take while providing the routine care. Therefore, these 3 booklets were developed in collaboration with the UNICEF and the Family Health Bureau to provide information for field health staff on precautions that they should take for personal protection. These were developed in all 3 languages. In collaboration with the Perinatal Association of Private Hospitals in Sri Lanka, a series of webinars were conducted for doctors and nurses, providing selected updates on perinatology. We did not stop that. Once the lockdown was over, under the new normal, we conducted in-person district-level workshops for health staff. Several capacity building programs were conducted, starting from Colombo Municipal Council area in January, and then in July and early August in other districts such as Ampara, Nuwara and Hambantota. Seven such programs were conducted, and these workshops were for midwives and nurses, and they were conducted by experts from Colombo and from the respective districts. I must thank all the council members and the regional consultants for their contribution during these workshops. We conducted 7 such programs, and out of which 3 were on audit and basic research methodologies for midwives and nurses. They were given hands-on training on developing research proposals and performing audits. Later, they were given an opportunity to submit abstract and present research findings at the pre-congress sessions that we had yesterday. During this year, the challenge for us was to keep the perinatal health on top of the agenda and not let this rather important area of work disappear amongst the other emerging interests that were COVID-related. We developed and printed booklets on perinatal mental health for pregnant women and their families. Content of these books were common perinatal mental health issues and how to deal with such issues. An Android app has also been developed for them, which can be downloaded from the Android App Store. Additionally, several newspaper articles were published in local languages to supplement the public awareness on maternal mental well-being and the much more important pros and cons on cesarean sections. We continued work on introduction of therapeutic cooling and nitric oxide therapy, which was initiated last year under Dr. Suranta's presidency. Several training programs were conducted for those hospitals which were given the therapeutic cooling and nitric oxide machines in tertiary care hospitals, 15 tertiary care hospitals, that is level 3 and 3 plus hospitals in the country. The first issue of Sri Lanka Journal of Perinatal Medicine was published, and it will be launched at this meeting. This journal has become a reality because of the effort of the editorial board comprising of eminent local and foreign personalities and the editor-in-chief, Professor Dulani Gunasekara. We continue to publish our magazine Genesis under the editorship of Dr. Suranta, which covers discussions on recent knowledge in the field and the activities of the Perinatal Society. Right throughout the year, we were collaborating with all other stakeholders such as Family Health Bureau, World Health Organization, UNICEF, UNFPA, and World Bank. We represented in the Intercollegiate Committee of the Sri Lanka Medical Association and also conducted collaborative symposium with the SLMA and also with SLCOG. The ending of the year marks with our annual scientific congress, and we had several parallel workshops, one for public and private partnership. This was held today morning with eminent participants from various sectors. Honorable State Minister, Madam Sudarshani Fernando Polle, Honorable State Minister of Finance, Dr. Ajit Nimad Cabral, and several officials from the Ministry of Health participated at these workshops. We did some more collaborative work with the UNFPA on gender and disability, a workshop that was carried out this morning. And those are some of the activities that we carried out during this year. Before I wind up, I think there are several agencies and individuals that I must thank. They helped the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka in many ways throughout this year, providing us strength during these difficult times. Ministry of Health was always a source of encouragement, and I must thank the director and the consultants of the Family Health Bureau for the support extended to us throughout the year. Also, a special note of thanks goes to UN agencies such as World Health Organization, UNFPA, UNICEF, and the World Bank. I would also like to thank the Council and the Secretary, Dr. Asiri, for the immense support extended during the whole year. I must especially thank the Congress Chair, Dr. Surantha, for the great effort he undertook organizing all logistics, including the foreign and local faculties. It was really a huge challenge to have this kind of a session amidst this COVID situation. A special note of thanks to my unit staff at the Monitoring and Evaluation Unit of the Family Health Bureau for all the support extended, working voluntarily for extended hours. Finally, I'd like to thank all the sponsors, Platinum, Gold, and Silver, for their contributions, without which we will not be able to conduct this session in this scale. Thank you.
Thank you very much. President of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, Dr. Kaushalya Kasturiarachi, welcoming all of you, whilst giving you all a glimpse of the activities carried out during her tenure as the President of the Society. Ladies and gentlemen, time to call upon our chief guest to address all of you. Please welcome the Director General of Health Services of the Ministry of Health, Dr. Asela Gunawardena, addressing all of you.
Good evening to everybody. President, Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, Dr. Kaushalya Kasturiarachi, Congress Chair, Dr. Surantha Perera, Secretary, Dr. Asiri, and all the council members, all the directors from the Ministry of Health, professors, all the consultants, all my colleagues from Colombo South, Dr. Udita, and all the other doctors, and ladies and gentlemen. I take this opportunity to congratulate the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka for being able to organize the annual scientific congress in 2020 during this COVID-19 pandemic. This year has been a very challenging year, not only for the Sri Lanka, but also for the whole world, because the global pandemic of COVID-19. All our attention is gone mainly to prevent and control the pandemic. Recently, I met one of my friends in a similar event of like this, and I was elaborating the control measures that we are taking currently. And he said, when you are working at Kalubovila, you always talk us with the locking down of the whole country. Now what is your strategy? So as all of us know, we have three main ways of controlling this one. As in the first wave, we have locked down the country for 3 months, or otherwise we can open up all the gates and wait until it's spread. But now this time, what we have done was we have doing the locking down where the cases are coming up and open up the society or the economic activities while we are working and controlling. That is the most difficult strategy that we are adapting. I think all of you have experience better than me because you all are working in the hospitals. So you all are getting everyday positive patients, quarantine in the staff, and a lot of problems. But this life, I think we'll have to adapt for the about next year or maybe another 2 years. So we'll have to go with this situation, and organizing this type of congress and scientific sessions also is very challenging. Now we have put a limited number of seats, and it's very difficult. I know that with that capacity to organize, but we'll have to live with that. So I think Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka can do a lot ahead during those 2 years. However, as a nation or as a Ministry of Health, we cannot compromise the routine healthcare service as well as the continuous professional development of the healthcare workforce. Under these challenging circumstances, we have demonstrated that having a strong, competent healthcare workforce is one of the greatest assets to our country. In COVID-19 control, Sri Lanka managed well due to the strong healthcare system as well as the team spirit. Under such circumstances, taking leadership and organizing a program of this caliber by Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka is commendable. The program of this meeting seems to carefully planned, not only focusing on the professional development of the doctors, but also the other staff categories involving in perinatology. Having a pre-congress session for the midwives and nurses, giving them opportunities to present their audits and the best practices certainly will motivate the healthcare workers to engage fully in audits and research. Program planned for the doctors with eminent local and global experts will certainly provide a platform for all to update their knowledge and skills and face the new challenges presented to the health system each and every day. The technology is advancing, and the COVID-19 pandemic made us realize that there are novel ways for service delivery, moving beyond the traditional face-to-face contact. I appreciate the effort of Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka for organizing this event and opening it to all relevant healthcare personnel who will become virtual participants. I believe that this is a good opportunity not only for doctors but also for the nurses and midwives to enhance their skills and connect with the global experts and develop their competencies. To make maximum use of the efforts undertaken by the Perinatal Society, I hope all participants will actively engage themselves in the sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asela Gunawardena, the Chief Guest, Director General of Health Services of the Ministry of Health, for those words of encouragement and, of course, well wishes and setting out the plans. Ladies and gentlemen, before the customary oration of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, we are ready for the launch of the Journal of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka. To present the first copies of the journal, I would like to call upon the Editor-in-Chief of the journal, Professor Dulani Gunasekara, to step forward, please. And she will present the first copies to the President of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, Dr. Kaushalya Kasturiarachi. And Dr. Kaushalya Kasturiarachi will present the copies to the members of the head table thereafter. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the launch of the Journal of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka. Thank you very much, Professor Dulani Gunasekara. And now would like to call upon Dr. Kaushalya Kasturiarachi to present a special token of appreciation to our chief guest, Dr. Asela Gunawardena, Director General of Health Services of the Ministry of Health, which is being presented in appreciation of his presence and address here at this inauguration of the Annual Scientific Congress 2020 of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka. Right, thank you very much, dignitaries. We are waiting our orator to join the sessions all the way from the UK. So we're going to move on with the presentation of the fellowships here at this inauguration ceremony. Once again, we'd like to call upon President of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, Dr. Kaushalya Kasturiarachi, to step forward, please, to present the fellowships. The profiles of the recipients of the fellowships will be recited by immediate past President and the Congress Chair 2020, Dr. Surantha Pereira. Would like to call upon the respective recipients to remain upstanding during the citation time of your profiles.
The first fellowship of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka will be awarded to Professor Indraji Amarasinghe, sir. Professor Indraji Amarasinghe had his primary education at Rewata Mahavidyalaya, Balapitiya, and Dharmashoka Vidyalaya, Ambalangoda. In 1964, he entered the Faculty of Medicine, University of Ceylon, Colombo. He graduated as a medical graduate in 1969 with flying colors. He worked as a house officer at the Disoisa Maternity Hospital and the National Hospital of Sri Lanka, and in 1971, he entered into his postgraduate career in obstetrics and gynecology. From the year 1971 to 1974, he worked as a registrar to Professor D.E. Ranasinghe at DMH and General Hospital, Colombo, and Faculty of Medicine, Colombo. He obtained the overseas training as a registrar in obstetrics and gynecology at the Royal Bucks and Stoke Mandeville Hospital in the United Kingdom. Upon returning to the country, he joined the Faculty of Medicine, University of Peradeniya, as a senior lecturer in obstetrics and gynecology in 1980. In 2002, he was conferred with the professorship and he became the Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology. During his tenure in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, Professor Indraji Amarasinghe was involved in shaping up hundreds of medical undergraduates and postgraduate students in obstetrics and gynecology. He also served as a member of the Board of Study in Obstetrics and Gynecology since 1982. He also participated as an examiner in the MD and MSc examinations conducted by the Postgraduate Institute of Medicine, Colombo. He was the head of the department since 1991, and from 2006, he was the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine, University of Peradeniya. His academic services were not confined to the University of Peradeniya. He conducted many teachings and educational activities at the Faculty of Medicine, Colombo, and Galle, Kelaniya, and Sri Jadanapura. He was a member of the Standing Committee of the University Grant Commission, member of the Council of the SLMC, and a member of the SLMA. Professor Indraji Amarasinghe pioneered in reshaping the perinatal care services in Sri Lanka. He is the founder president of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka in 2001. He was an active member of many societies including being the president of the Sri Lanka College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, Menopausal Society, and Kandy Society of Medicine. Internationally, he became a member of the RCOG in 1978 and fellow of RCOG in 1991. Professor Indraji Amarasinghe's contribution in perinatal medicine is invaluable. He initiated the vision and mission of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka in promoting maternal, fetal, and neonatal well-being, advancing the theory and practice of perinatology, encourage training and research, providing expert advice to government and other bodies on matters pertaining to perinatology, and to maintain liaison with other organizations of professionals involved in perinatology, both in Sri Lanka and internationally. Madam President, honoring the services rendered in the field of perinatal medicine, I have the honor to invite Professor Indraji Amarasinghe to be conferred upon fellowship in the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka. Next fellowship will be awarded to Dr. Mrs. Vinita Karunaratne. Dr. Vinita Karunaratne had her primary education at Musaeus College, Colombo, and Devi Balika Vidyalaya. She graduated from the Faculty of Medicine, Colombo, and obtained her Master of Science in Community Medicine in 1988. Then she moved on to obtain her Doctor of Medicine in Community Medicine in 1992. Following her overseas training at Velo Christian Medical College, India, and National University Hospital in Singapore, Dr. Karunaratne obtained the board certification as a consultant community physician from the Postgraduate Institute of Medicine in 1993. Upon returning to Sri Lanka, she was appointed as the Program Manager of the National Family Planning Program at the Family Health Bureau, Ministry of Health. She pioneered in expanding the family planning services as a component of the Safe Motherhood Program, established new family planning clinics, and introduced a new family planning method into the system. Once she became the Director of Maternal and Child Health in the year 1999, Dr. Vinita Karunaratne spearheaded in uplifting the perinatal care in the country. She was a founder member of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka in 2001, and she was the President of the Perinatal Societies of Sri Lanka from 2005 to 2006. She has a track record of innovation and leadership in maternal and child health. She was instrumental in establishing a separate neonatal care unit at the Family Health Bureau with a consultant community physician as the head of the unit. One of the functions of this unit was to coordinate perinatal care activities with Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka. She collaborated with multi-stakeholders, including WHO, UNICEF, and other UN agencies, to enhance the funding for the service delivery in maternal and newborn care. Her dual role as the Director MCH and a pioneer member of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka was influential in bringing up several important policy and strategic decisions for the betterment of the perinatal care. She initiated formulation of the very first National Maternal and Child Health Policy, providing technical inputs in developing the Maternal and Newborn Health Strategic Plan for 2017 to 2025, Maternal and Newborn Health Strategic Plan 2012 to 2016, and assisted in conducting the study on assessment of maternal and perinatal death surveillance and response implementation in Sri Lanka in year 2019. Not only as a leader in maternal and child health, she also functioned as a teacher and researcher. She was a visiting lecturer at the Faculty of Medicine, Faculty of Medicine, Peradeniya, and Postgraduate Institute of Medicine, Colombo. She conducted several research studies and supervised many research studies conducted by postgraduate students in MSc and MD Community Medicine and MSc Medical Administration. Effect on an intervention of a quality improvement in postnatal care provided by public health midwives, a study on quality of family planning services provided by the National Family Planning Program, family planning services provided by hospitals in the Western Province, the use of single minimal doses of anthelmintic in the treatment of soil-transmitted nematode infection among the school children are some of the examples of a research role. Dr. Karunaratne has received President's Award in 2010. As the co-author of the article written on pregnancy, reducing maternal death and disability in Sri Lanka and national strategies. She also received an award in recognition of contribution to the National Family Planning Program in Sri Lanka in 1982. She has over 35 years of experience as a medical officer, consultant in public health, director, trainer, and a social change agent in Sri Lanka and internationally. Madam President, honoring the services rendered in the field of perinatal medicine, I have the honor to invite Dr. Vinita Karunaratne to be conferred upon Fellowship in the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, finally we have our orator joining with us all the way from the United Kingdom. So would like to request all of you to take your seats once more and would like to beg your pardon for disturbing you all during the fellowship time. We're going to have Professor Stephen Kennedy to talk to you all on the postnatal growth of the preterm. He's a professor of reproductive medicine, co-director, Oxford Maternal and Perinatal Health Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome once more the President of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, Dr. Kaushalya Kasturiarachchi, to recite the profile of our orator, and at the same time would like to request all the invitees, doctors, dignitaries enjoying the fellowship at the back of the banquet to take your respective seats kindly.
Professor Stephen Kennedy. Professor Stephen Kennedy graduated in 1978 from Keble College, Oxford, in experimental psychology. He qualified in medicine at Guy's Hospital, London in 1984, and then trained at the John Radcliffe's Hospital, Oxford, Queen Charlotte's and Chelsea Hospital, London, and the Royal Berkshire Hospital, Reading. He held the post of Research Fellow 1986 to 89, Clinical Lecturer 1992 to 1994, and Senior Fellow in Reproductive Medicine 1994 till 1999 in the Nuffy Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, University of Oxford, before being appointed to the post of Clinical Reader in 1999 and Professor of Reproductive Medicine in 2011. He was Head of Department 2005 till 2019, and he was also the Clinical Director, Women's Services from 2011 to 13 in the Oxford University Hospitals NHS Trust, and then Divisional Director of Children's and Women's Services 2014 to 2019. He has prepared national guidelines on the management of chronic pelvic pain and endometriosis and was first author on the original ESHRE endometriosis guideline. He is a founder board member of the World Endometriosis Research Foundation, and in 2009 he was awarded the International Arnold Bruno Prize by the Accademia Nazionale di Lincei, Rome, for his research into the genetic basis of endometriosis. Since 2009, he has jointly led the Intergrowth 21st project, a large-scale multi-center project funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, involving health institutions in 11 geographically diverse countries around the world that aims to assess fetal and newborn growth under optimal and various suboptimal conditions. His research is focused on the full spectrum of women's health, including maternal and fetal health, reproductive medicine and genetics, and the study of cancer. In 2014, Professor Kennedy's work brought about a set of international standards for newborn weight, length, and head circumference based on the data from over 4,600 healthy, well-nourished women with problem-free pregnancies from urban areas across 8 countries. His more recent work has shed light on indicators of neurodevelopment in early childhood and the impact good nutrition and health care in the first 1,000 days of a child's life can have on their physical and cognitive development, and whether that development is influenced more by genes or environment. In addition to his work at Oxford and with Intergrowth 21st project, Kennedy is a trustee of the World Endometriosis Research Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, may I now invite Professor Stephen Kennedy to deliver his oration. Thank you.
The first thing to say is it is an enormous honor to have been invited to give this oration today to the Society. I'm extremely grateful for the invitation, and I deeply regret that I couldn't be there in person. The ties between Oxford and Sri Lanka are extremely strong, and I say this is a great honor to be able to give this talk, which focuses on the postnatal growth of the preterm. But what I'd like to do is to start off by establishing some general principles. And the first principle is that how do you go about measuring the growth of preterm infants in the postnatal period? And the measures that one shouldn't be using are size at birth measures, which after all are only taken once from the newborn, and in effect are a retrospective summary of how that newborn grew in an intrauterine environment. Postnatal, oops, I don't know why. Postnatal growth measures, on the other hand, are taken repeatedly and should be complemented by knowledge of how that newborn has been fed and whether it has experienced any morbidity. So charts that are based upon size at birth data, in our opinion, should not be used to evaluate the growth of preterm babies in the postnatal period. Why? Well, because, as I said earlier, they rely upon cross-sectional data which simply can't be used to reconstruct the way in which that baby grew in utero. And pretending that such patterns represent normal postnatal growth to us makes no biological sense whatsoever. Why? Because to assume that preterm infants should grow like fetuses seems to us to be a complete fallacy. Now, the problem, I think, globally, is that the charts that are most used to monitor the postnatal growth of preterm infants are based upon those developed by Tanis Fenton's group. And in the 2013 systematic review, a meta-analysis with which I'm sure you're familiar, the charts that that group developed were based upon cross-sectional weight and birth data from 6 studies. However, the head circumference and length at birth data came from only 2 of those 6 studies. So in other words, the head circumference and length data do not come from the same population that the weight at birth data did. And more worryingly, when one is considering preterm infants, the gestational age estimation for the infants included in those studies were assessed using first trimester ultrasound in only 1. Now, before we started our work to develop postnatal growth charts for preterm infants and size at birth charts, we conducted 2 systematic reviews shown here in this slide. For size at birth and birth weight for gestational age charts, there were 102 published charts, but only 8 of those satisfied the minimum quality criteria required. And as far as the preterm postnatal growth charts are concerned, there are 61 published charts, but all those had considerable limitations in terms of how gestational age was estimated, whether anthropometric measures were standardized or not, and whether standardized feeding and recommendations were employed. All of those published charts relied upon cross-sectional data and assume that preterm postnatal growth mimics fetal growth, which, as I said earlier, seems to us not to make any biological sense. In addition, none of the studies followed the WHO recommendation for the development of international standards. As I'm sure you're aware, in 1995, WHO declared that human growth worldwide should only be evaluated using international standards describing how individuals should grow. And this is an extremely important distinction that I would like to focus on for a moment. International standards describe how fetuses and newborns should grow when the environment is optimal and when constraints on growth are minimal. In other words, international standards describe optimal growth, as opposed to references, which simply describe how fetuses and newborns have grown at a particular time and or place. Now, you're, as neonatologists and pediatricians in the audience, you will be only too well aware of the landmark study published in 2006, which described the international WHO child growth standards, describing, as I say, how infants should grow from birth to 5 years of age, provided that mothers were healthy, living in a clean environment, free of disease, and most importantly, that the infants were breastfed. And all that we did in the study that I'm about to describe to you was to fill in the gap that was left by WHO by looking at growth from conception to birth in the Intergrowth 21st project. We used the same conceptual approach as WHO did when they created their child growth standards, and the same statistical design and methodology. The Intergrowth 21st sites were moving from west to east: Seattle in Washington State, USA, Pelotas in Brazil, Oxford in the UK, Turin in Italy, Muscat in Oman, Nairobi in Kenya, Nagpur, India, and Beijing, China. 2 of those sites, Pelotas in Brazil and Muscat in Oman, had participated in the original WHO study that had developed the child growth standards. And we thought that was important to have that degree of overlap. All these 8 sites were chosen because they provided a healthy environment for growth based upon the criteria you see here in the bullet points. In other words, the environment was conducive for optimal human growth. Now, the Intergrowth 21st project consists of 5 complementary studies. In the first, the newborn cross-sectional study, we measured all newborns that were born in the 8 sites over a 12-month period. In the fetal growth longitudinal study, we assessed optimal growth using ultrasound from less than 14 weeks gestation to birth. And in the other studies, we followed those babies that were born in the fetal growth longitudinal study up to 2 years of age. And most importantly, those that were born preterm in that cohort were studied very intensively up to 12 months of age. But for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to focus on these 2, the newborn cross-sectional study and the preterm postnatal follow-up study. Now, across all 8 sites, there were nearly 60,000 pregnancies during the study period, representing the total population of Intergrowth 21st, of which roughly a third consisted of low-risk pregnancies. These women were healthy, well-educated, well-nourished, living, as I said earlier, in a clean environment, receiving evidence-based antenatal care and free of known morbidities, and therefore at low risk of adverse maternal and neonatal outcomes. All babies that were born in the entire population were assessed at birth using standard methodology that had been developed by the WHO team in creating the child growth standards. In other words, for length, weight, and head circumference at birth, using standardized protocols. And the newborn size for gestational age standards that we developed arose from the assessment of the babies born to those healthy mothers who had low-risk pregnancies. Those international standards were published in the Lancet in 2014. And here are the charts that were produced for both girls and boys that are freely available at our website, which is shown below. Now, as neonatologists, you're only too aware that in a healthy population, there will be relatively few babies born before 33, 32 weeks gestation. And therefore, if I go back to the previous slide, you'll see that the charts for international size of birth started around 33 weeks gestation. And that was a criticism that a number of neonatologists around the world leveled at us, saying, well, it's all very well having international standards for size of birth. However, it's of no use to us if we don't have values for infants born before 33 weeks gestation. We responded to that very reasonable criticism by publishing a letter in the Lancet in 2016, supplementing the existing newborn size at birth charts, which are shown in dashed lines, by going to the total intergrowth population and choosing 194 girls and 214 boys. But because their pregnancies were not completely low risk, and because those babies, in other words, did not come from completely healthy pregnancies, we chose to call them references for birth weights at less than 33 weeks. But as you can see, despite that slight limitation, they nevertheless overlap pretty well with the newborn size standards. Now, the interesting thing is, what was the preterm birth rate in the entire population of both low risk and medium to high risk population of pregnancies? Well, there were 53,000, nearly 54,000 births on those 8 sites with really reliable ultrasound estimation of gestational age. And the preterm birth rate for the whole population is shown here, 10.8%, with a definition of preterm birth being any birth or fetal loss from 16 weeks to 37 weeks gestation. And that represents 5,828 preterms for study. And we set about, in collaboration with colleagues in Brazil, looking at phenotypic classification of those preterms on the grounds that, in our opinion, preterm birth is not a single condition, but rather a highly, highly complex and heterogeneous condition. And for those of you interested, we published these findings in JAMA Pediatrics in 2015. Studies were led, as I say, by my colleagues Fernando Barros and Cesar Victora in Brazil. The phenotypic clusters numbered 12, and they're shown here on this slide. On the left-hand column are the clusters representing the main severe maternal fetal or placental condition. And as you can see, most of these causes are pretty well known to you, but the striking thing is that the largest percentage of preterm births seemingly had no obvious severe maternal fetal or placental condition associated with the preterm birth. And when one looked at the outcomes in these 12 phenotypic clusters, the really striking thing, as you can see here, looking at in the 3 right-hand columns, gestational age of birth in weeks, NICU stay for 7 or more days, or the NMR per 1,000 births, that the lowest NICU stay and NMR per 1,000 births was in the first group. In other words, the group where there were no obvious severe maternal, fetal, placental conditions, and unsurprisingly, the highest morbidity and mortality was seen in the perinatal sepsis cluster. And we think that these data are very important because they should help neonatologists as well as the families themselves appreciate that if a preterm baby is born and there is no associated conditions such as those shown in on the slide. In other words, if there's no obvious reason why the baby has been born preterm, then the morbidity and mortality associated with that baby is really quite good, certainly in comparison to the other conditions. The low-risk pregnancies that were followed throughout by performing ultrasound scans every 5 weeks in a highly standardized and scientifically rigorous way represented the fetal growth longitudinal study of some 4,500 pregnancies. It would have been nice, of course, to have been able to follow all those low-risk pregnancies belonging to healthy mothers, but that simply wasn't practical. But that population of 4,607 pregnancies contributed to the establishment of the International Fetal Growth Standards that was similarly published in Lancet paper in 2014. We have followed those babies up to 2 years of age and demonstrated that those babies grow and develop in a satisfactory way. Their growth is pretty much on the median for weight, length, and head circumference compared to the WHO child growth standards, supporting, in our opinion, the appropriateness of choosing that cohort to establish international standards. We've also assessed neurodevelopment at 2 years of age in that cohort in 5 of the 8 countries. A whole variety of different neurodevelopmental tests, but it's vision, cognition, language development, behavior, and fine and gross motor skills and attention that I'll be talking about in a moment. We published last year the data from those neurodevelopmental studies, demonstrating very clearly that not only is growth satisfactory and amongst the cohort whose intrauterine growth we studied so closely, but they also achieve the same neurodevelopmental milestones and associated behaviors at a very similar time. That led to a number of press articles around the world because we have clearly demonstrated, we feel, that healthy women have healthy babies that grow in a similar way inside the womb, achieve a similar size at birth, and achieve similar growth and neurodevelopment at 2 years of age, irrespective of ethnicity, ancestry, race, color of their skin, or where they're living. Healthy women have healthy babies. Now, what I'd like now to move on to is to describe how we have developed the preterm postnatal growth standards from the small number, 4.5%, of those babies that were born preterm in the fetal growth longitudinal study. Those babies were followed very intensively from birth to 2 years of age, with close anthropometric measuring up to 1 year of age. So as to construct these international standards for describing optimal postnatal growth of preterm babies, these were the exclusion criteria that we used. Accepting that not all preterm babies, of course, are born healthy, but we tried by using these exclusion criteria to choose a cohort that was as healthy as possible. And very importantly, we introduced throughout all the sites preterm feeding recommendations that were put together by the Intergrowth Committee led by Zulfikar Bhutta, which established that recommendations were based largely on the use of human milk, if possible. For those of you who are interested, these, I hope you can see this slide, are the feeding recommendations, with mother's own milk from the breast being the preference for feeding these preterm babies. And I'm very happy to share these slides, or you can go to the original paper to look at these feeding recommendations. In particular, the human milk supplementation of vitamin D, phosphorus, calcium, iron, multi-component fortifiers. The study led to the publication of standards for describing the postnatal growth of preterm infants. These are the standards for weight, length, and head circumference. We strongly believe that it's not just weight that should be measured on a regular basis in preterm infants in the postnatal period. And these standards are freely available at the website below. The interesting thing is to compare the intergrowth preterm postnatal standards here for weight in blue to the estimated fetal weight standards that arose from the fetal growth longitudinal study shown in red. And as you can see in this slide, with both sexes combined, the babies who are born preterm do not grow in the postnatal period as the fetus does, confirming our original hypothesis that babies born preterm are not fetuses. When you look at the postnatal standards for these preterm infants in blue, the dashed lines, you'll see that the overlap with the existing WHO child growth standards occurs roughly at 64 post-menstrual weeks for girls on this slide shown here. So our recommendation is that the intergrowth standards for evaluating and monitoring the postnatal growth of preterm infants should be used up until 64 postmenstrual weeks, and from that point onwards, the WHO child growth standards can be used. The work that I've described has had a major impact, I think, on global health, and brought about largely and rather sadly because of the Zika epidemic. This led the World Health Organization and the Centers for Disease Control in the States to recommend that the intergrowth 21st standards should be used to assess head circumference at birth within the first day of life, and should also be used to evaluate the postnatal growth of preterm infants. Why? Because these are international standards and they should be used instead of the countless local reference charts that are available around the world. And finally, what I'd like to show you is a comparison between the preterm postnatal growth standards that we have developed, shown here in red, and the Fenton's charts here shown as just as an example for both birth weight for girls. And as you can see, there is marked discrepancy between the Fenton charts and the intergrowth charts, which explains why the diagnosis of extrauterine growth restriction is much more common when using the Fenton's birth weight charts. And there are a number of groups around the world who are starting to do studies comparing these charts. And I just show two here, one from Turkey and one from my own hospital in Oxford. And the quotes I'll read out from these two studies. From the Turkish study, almost 1 in 5 cases assessed as extrauterine growth restriction according to Fenton were within the normal interval according to the intergrowth 21st standards. And then from the study done in my own hospital by neonatologists, on average, the UK charts that are commonly used, 9 to 16 centiles greater than the intergrowth standards for weight gain. And the significance of this difference between the Fenton charts and the intergrowth charts is, of course, that if you, as neonatologists, overdiagnose extrauterine growth restriction, that will lead to overfeeding of the babies with consequent metabolic and cardiovascular long-term risks associated with such overfeeding. Now, let me finish by describing what we've been trying to do conceptually for the last 15 years. In blue, we show the international standards that describe optimal growth of healthy babies belonging to healthy mothers. In red are babies that are born preterm and or small for a whole variety of different reasons, because these are very complex heterogeneous syndromes. And the issue that concerns all of you as neonatologists is what to do in the postnatal period for babies that are born small and or preterm, because overfeeding undoubtedly leads to a greater risk of obesity, a greater risk of cardiovascular and metabolic disease in the future. Well, we believe very strongly and almost philosophically that you need to know why a baby is born preterm and or small, and you need to use international standards to monitor the growth of those babies in the postnatal period. And seeking generic solutions to correct the consequences of an adverse prenatal or intrauterine environment, irrespective of the cause, be it infection, malnutrition, smoking, preeclampsia, makes no biological sense whatsoever. We need, as physicians, to make a diagnosis and then monitor that baby appropriately so as to give more personalized and targeted interventions. So in conclusion, preterm birth, with or without small for gestational age, is a highly heterogeneous condition with multiple risk factors and etiologies. We strongly believe, as we have shown previously in our publications in JAMA Pediatrics, that improved phenotypic classification of these babies should facilitate more targeted interventions. Extrauterine growth of preterm infants does not mimic fetal growth. That makes no biological sense whatsoever to assume that the two are the same. Reference charts derived from size at birth data are not postnatal growth charts. Postnatal growth of preterm infants should be monitored using international standards that are derived from longitudinal data, not cross-sectional data. Finally, I draw your attention to this website, which provides detailed information on the recommendations for feeding preterm infants and how to monitor them using international standards. And there is an e-learning course available at the website below with a university accredited, it's a university accredited course. And I thank you very much for your attention. And I hope that in this small way, we can work together in the future to standardize the way in which preterm infants are evaluated across the world. Thank you.
Professor Stephen Kennedy, making the oration here at this Annual Scientific Congress 2020 of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka. So with that note, ladies and gentlemen, time to wrap up the formalities. But before we do so, to express our extreme gratitude towards certain teams, individuals, organizations, everyone who contributed towards the grand success of this edition of the Annual Scientific Congress. Would like to call upon Secretary of the Society. Please welcome Dr. Asiri Heva Malage to propose the vote of thanks.
Our chief guest today, Dr. Asela Gunawardena, Director General of Health Services, Dr. Kaushalya Kasturiarachchi, President of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, Dr. Surantha Perera, Congress Chair and the immediate past President, all the past Presidents, Council and members of the Perinatal Society, representatives of the Ministry of Health, Presidents and representatives of other professional organizations and distinguished invitees. I deem it a great honor and privilege to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. And on behalf of the President and the membership of the Perinatal Society, I would like to convey my sincere thanks to Dr. Asela Gunawardena, the Director General of Health Services, for gracing this occasion as the chief guest. While you are leading the COVID-19 battle and extremely busy, dedicating your time for the Perinatal Society is a strength and an honor to us. I thank all the members of the Council for their tireless efforts to make this event a success, especially to Dr. Surantha Perera, immediate past president, and the Congress chair for his invaluable support in organizing this event. I salute all the past presidents who had worked tirelessly to bring Perinatal Society up to the present standards. A special thank goes to Director of the Family Health Bureau, Dr. Chitramali De Silva, consultants of the Family Health Bureau, and the Family Health Bureau staff, especially to Dr. Vasana, Dr. Malit, Dr. Anuradha, Dr. Ruinda, Dr. Shakira, Dr. Pamod, Dr. Deepal, Dr. Ashan, Dr. Tharindu, Dr. Prabhani, Dr. Minoli, then Ms. Lasanthi, Mr. Joseph, Mr. Lantra, Ms. Nilmini, Mr. Praveen, and Mr. Nilanga. I will be failing in my duty if I do not thank our sponsors for their generous contribution, especially our platinum, gold, and silver sponsors. The support of the WHO, UNFPA, UNICEF, and the World Bank is priceless in making this event a success. Because of their support in sponsoring the doctors, nurses, and midwives of the government sector, we were able to deliver this session to a large number of healthcare professionals. I also thank the event coordinator, Mrs. Dilisha, and her team at Asia Tours. Comparer of today's event, Mr. Dushan Vas and Dr. Heshani, Dr. Ishani, and Dr. Vihanga for comparing at the annual sessions. I thank the management of the Watersedge Hotel for providing all the provisions to conduct this Congress safely. Please accept my apologies for not being able to thank individuals to each and everyone who supported to make this event a success. Finally, thanks to everyone for their presence here today, as well as to everyone who joined with us virtually from all over the country. You are our strength. It had been a tough year for the Perinatal Society amidst this unprecedented time where the whole world is struggling against the COVID-19 pandemic. We are still learning how to adjust to these challenging times and to the new normalcy. As you all witnessed today, we had to experience the little hiccups of technology while we try to arrange the event in this new normalcy. Nevertheless, newborns are the jewels of a nation, and amidst any challenge, we must strive to provide the best services for them, and I hope all of you will continue to support the Perinatal Society to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Secretary of the Perinatal Society of Sri Lanka, Dr. Asiri Heva Malage, proposing the vote of thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, would like to request all of you to remain upstanding as the ceremonial procession would leave the proceedings now. So thank you very much, everyone. Hope you'll have a wonderful time. Make sure that you all practice the correct guidelines during the fellowship time. Thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the fellowship. Good night.